So we have JIT, oh my god, that's huge. Let's just get our camera. Yay, we're here, we're back, we got a camera image. And right away, one thing I want to do, I don't want to deal with like red planes and green planes and blue planes, and I totally can. Let's just make it grayscale like we did with the cathedral scan. So I'll do the JIT RGB to Luma. And I'll change it from a 4-plane matrix of ARGB, alpha, green, red, blue, to just one single grayscale image right here. So now we just have black and white values. And there's a pretty, I haven't shown you this object yet. It's used a lot in image sonification. It's called JIT3M. And it will just calculate the minimum cell or pixel value, the average cell or pixel value, and the maximum one. So for something like this, the minimum and the max is probably 0 and 255, because I have this sweater and then we have this backboard right here. And if I just hook that up, and actually, because it's char data, it's 0 to 255. That's, oop, wrong out. Okay, 254, you got me there. And then the average pixel value, if we're assuming this is 1280 by 720 pixels, and it's only one plane of information, the average pixel is 130. And then if I cover the camera up, the average pixel value is 0. And it looks like there's still some light coming in because the maximum pixel value is still somehow like 30. With this light in here and this projector, I'm not sure where in the image it is, but if I kind of start to pull back, you can see. And what's kind of fun though is like right away, like without even really doing very much, I already have kind of this like movement kind of thing. I almost have kind of a, what's those things called? Theremin, where I can kind of translate that into movement. And let's say I want to do like, I can just make a cycle wave. And this is basically just a sine wave. I have to do that easy DAC thing to get audio output. I just hook that up right here and turn that on. And I can send a float to it, and it'll tell it what frequency. I always forget like the sound in this room is actually pretty good. Or like it's a lot more powerful than I gave it credit for. I guess we could just hook that straight up. And that's kind of, I mean, that's right, cool. We got a performance, we're done. But I mean, like, this is like kind of what I'm talking about. Like, now we have a value, we hook it up to sound, and now it's just our job to kind of clean up those values or isolate values or have more control of our environment. And right away, one thing is, let's say I don't want any grayscale values, I just want black and white values. I'm going to do the JIT op object. I'll say at op, it's how I do mathematical, or is mathematical a word? Or is that just from Adventure Time?
I think it's just a real
Is it real? Every time I say it, I feel like I'm just like, anyway. I can do greater than. So I'm going to compare each coming pixel and ask it if it's greater than a certain value. I can just feed that value into here. And I will intercept. I'll do actually. So now any pixel that's greater than 10 in terms of a grayscale value, if that's true, it will return that pixel as 255, almost as a binary way of saying, yes, that's true. But if a pixel that's coming in is less than 10, it'll be like, that's not true. Actually, I have it flipped around, sorry. So like this, my sweater is under a value of 10, so it's representing it as white, saying it is less than that. And everything else, all this light in this room, it is greater than 10. So, am I flipping this around?
Isn't black 0?
What's that?
Is black 0?
Black is 0 and white is 255.
Yeah.
So, it's true this is less than 10.
Yeah.
And the black is saying it's false, it's not less than 10. So it's representing it as that.
How do you invert? Is there
How do I invert? Oh, I just replaced less than to greater than.
invert like the
Yeah. And I could like kind of sweep, and we could just make a cool, like, I don't know, we could like hook that up to a sine wave and sweep through the values, yeah?
What do you write to get the sound?
To get the what, sorry?
The sound? I'm just like,
Oh, sorry. The easy DAC with a tilde. It just stands for easy, as in easy to do, not easy to remember, and digital to analog conversion. So now I can feed that back into here. And the values of my mean are a little more like responsive because I'm not like calculating all these grayscale values. Either a pixel is on or it's off. And now I can like enact more change upon it. And also like I can see consistently that like based on how this camera is setting up, I'm getting kind of ranges of 0 to 255. I could raise this if I wanted. And like, and this is like the same thing you were doing for Arduinos and sensors. There's no right answer to like what value is going to come in. You're just testing it, and then you kind of get a sense of what the range is, and then you scale it to be a value that is more responsive to what you want. So,
when you change the pixel values, what because the image has a lot is a matrix, so what is actually being sonified? The whole average value of the whole image or a single pixel in the center?
it would be like if I added all the values of the pixels together and then divided it by the entirety of how many pixels we have in the entire image.
That is being sonified.
And then it's just giving me that average as it's reporting the mean. Yes?
Is there an easy way to make a histogram out of an image? Not the image, not the bars. But
Oh,
the number.
I thought you said Instagram. Create a histogram out of numbers received. Let's see. I've never tried to do this.
Yeah,
I actually don't even know what a histogram is.
Oh, okay. On Lightroom or Photoshop, there's a histogram on top.
Oh,
That's
okay.
saying, like I have 0 to 255 values, and these are that many pixels in each value.
Got it.
Like how many are in like grayscale or what? So you select.
So there's like an XY table showing the representation of how many times each pixel value.
You can see how it can be beneficial.
I'm sure I use something called, there's something called like, is it table? Oh, multi-slider. Which actually, I showed multi-slider a little bit in code for this week's GitHub. It's basically a slider, but you have like multiple sliders like right here. Like this is slider 1 and it has a value, this is slider 2 and it has a value. And I could make a slider of, I mean, God, it would, like for a 1280 by 720 image, it would be pretty intense. But you can set like the range of the slider and have it funnel all its values in, and it would tell you, like you could tell it to map like pixels that are 0, how many do we have? Pixels that are 1, how many do we have? And it would like map that as a histogram.
These will be done inserted into like a meeting, and okay, so this meeting, this many
Yeah.
can be anything.
So I was going to say over here, let's say I'm getting values between 30 and it looks like 110. I'm going to scale that to 50 to 800.
The 50 to 800 there is not random, right?
It's not the what?
That's not like some random number
It's completely random. Or like I'm just like that's a range of frequencies that like is low to not ear-splittingly high, I think. Although I don't hear a lot of frequencies, so what's that? Yeah, this is just I'm literally giving it telling it a sine wave like what frequency to oscillate at. And there's ways to like translate. There's like you can do like there's an object like frequency to you can convert a frequency to a MIDI note number. Maybe we'll do that while we're at it. I'm gonna do this for 3 more minutes. No. That's actually, is it returning a MIDI value for that? Yeah, it looks like it's converting the frequency to a MIDI note range. I'm sure you could like filter out to get a certain scale in terms of that. And the thing is, like, also we can.
You could also like try to have different values communicate to each other. Like if this one is this, like make this not as higher as like to get an harmony.
Yeah. And we don't have to do black and white. I remember we can unpack any one of these planes. And rather than doing RGB to Luma, I'm going to grab the red plane. And I just happen to have this red filter right here. I don't know why. Oh, wait, I want the opposite, so. Unless it's less than. What am I doing? I only want it if it's a red value that's greater than 2. This is hard because of this this projector. If something's white, it definitely means it has like a ton of red in it. So let's see if this can. Does not have enough red. Who has something really red? Maybe we can get some more information from that. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh man, I'm going to play the most amazing song you've ever heard with this red notebook. So yeah. Also, like, it works really well if you really put your body into it and you look like you're having a good time, because if you're having a good time, everybody's having a good time.
Or you could dress all in red and perform.
I really want one of you guys to, like, paint your body in, like, a really, really, like, primary color tone, like green screen. And you could do a mix of green screening your body with, like, anime GIFs and having that green translate into, like, the sound as, like, a totally valid thing to do in this class. And like, here, the whole scanning thing, all I have to do the same thing with that cathedral scan thing is I would just have to have it grab one row of pixels and calculate the average pixel value in that, and then move down to the next row, and move down to the next row, and move down to the next row, and then I can control the speed, and I get this kind of scanning through the image. So. And I could have a separate plane that's just for green, separate plane that's just for blue, So-
I do like what I do with matrix by one by one. That's also like averaging image, right?
What do you mean matrix
I
one
just
by
like
one?
for charge 1, 1. I just do the image as one pixel, and I get the value of red, blue, and green from that one by one.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the same thing, right?
So that was my really quick, like, also that's about as far as my knowledge goes in terms of image sonification. No, I mean, if you want to start getting into things like FFT analysis and like harmonic scales, like you don't even know what that means.
Yeah, what did you say?
I don't know what it means. Like it's like fast Fourier transforms. I think it's like for. I'm just going to be upfront. Like my knowledge of sound is not rooted in anything formal or like realistic. But I do know that like Aaron Montoya knows a lot more about sound than Max than I do. But my what I'm trying to get across is still the same thing. Like we're just trying to find something out about the image, and we do that by kind of like controlling the parameters of what we actually have in the image. Like in this, like a webcam is whatever, but if I can just isolate it to black and white values and try and trim out certain things or only grab the red, and then I just play with how I map those values through to like something that's controlling sound. It doesn't even have to be a sine wave. We could be playing an audio file, and the amount of red in it could be the speed at which it plays back through that audio file. And then we also have something that's kind of responsive, and you don't have to worry about like, I don't know how to play like an instrument. Everything I do is with audio files because someone else plays the music, and then I just like rip it apart and break it apart, and then that's how I express myself somehow. So, are there any questions about that?
Why red?
Why red? You don't like red?
No, why?
Oh, do you want this back?
No. I mean, like, you just use red as a like example or like some parameters.
In this specific, yeah, because before I was using just luminance, like black and white, but this unpack object gives me, so this wouldn't have worked if I had been unpacking the green plane. Because when I held that book underneath the camera, I'd be like, there's no green in this image, so I'm not going to turn those pixels on.
I can turn it maybe so but really like you want a color that's like not prevalent in the other stuff that your camera's getting. So you want something that's like isolated to that's why I have the red notebook. There's like nothing else in there.
Like, the reason we're still seeing so much right here is because white has equal full values of red, green, and blue. So even though it's not red, there's still a ton of red in the image, so to speak. Also green, blue. And I'm using this greater than thing with a value right here so that I can control how intense. It's not that different than what we were doing with like the tolerance and like chroma keying. It's like only look for things with a color in this range and only key out certain things based on that.
Solve that. Can we use the hex value and give it like a range, between this and that? Because that would just use the red.
What's that?
Give it like a hex value, and like just the saturation, just the hue value with the SHL.
I think you can. I know if you like look into the object, there's a way where you can use HSL rather than RGB type stuff. But I personally haven't done much with it. But I do know that you can switch the settings over to something like that. Any other questions about this quick detour through image sonification?
What happens if you don't put a filter on that unpack object?
If I unplug that just right into the JIT 3M?
Yeah, just put that into the P window that you have.
Into the what?
Into the P window that you're reading.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's just a grayscale.
Okay. It's just so
Yeah, exactly. The reason I like doing this is just like, it's just so much easier. And the funny thing is, the trick with all this is, I could also even do it where like, if this is still too much going on, I'm going to switch back to RGB to Luma for a second. If this is still too much information, I can just downsample my matrix to 8 by 6 which is literally just this grid representation of pixels turning on and off.
That would produce like less diverse sound.
Yeah, but it's also something we have a little more control over. Like it's the range, but we might want that if we were going to something with more of like a chiptune aesthetic or something, where there's like really fast rise and falls. Then like, let's see. Let's see. So this screen behind me is like throwing the camera. And this is where it becomes really important to have control over your environment and your performance. Because if you were doing something with light and color based, and you go to a venue and suddenly they have all these colorful green lights on you, and then your whole thing gets thrown off by that. Like you have to think a lot, especially if you're doing like image stuff and translating that. But what I was going to say is, I'm generating the sound from this one right here. This may not work as well as I think because of this. I'll just flip this around. I had it like this when it was working well, right? Yeah, there we go. I'm literally generating the values for the audio from this image right here. But if I was performing, I could show this image. And there's still a trend. We don't, obviously it's not quite as dynamic, but we don't have to show this image during the performance. The motion that happens in the original camera is still translating to like what the change is and what's happening. And a lot of times in performance, you can just lie. I lie all the fucking time when I'm performing. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many times I've seen something with like, I'm gonna put like an EEG brain reader on my head, and those values are going to that moving light over there in the corner, and I really just program the moving light to go like random. And then I'm like walking around like, oh geez, but my thoughts, my very core and being is controlling that light, and this isn't even plugged in. And the audience doesn't care. I mean, like, it could be fun to figure out how to do that, but like, you don't have to actually, I mean, anyway, and like, you get to create the world that you're performing in. You get to create like the sensation of like what's actually happening and what the connections and what the reality is. And if you perform it well and tell people what it is, they'll believe you. So just don't, that doesn't leave this room, guys. Like, trade secrets here. Okay, we should take a break. And I'm going to get to the stuff that I actually want to get to. Because there's a lot to get through, but that was the basic image sonification course. If you have questions during the break, come find me. Get back here by 7:55, please. Thank you.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
This is so dumb that I didn't ask.
And this is actually the exact same patch that I had you guys have 2 weeks ago. There was just an example of like how to do a really simple A/B mixing with like some slide and some whatnot. Except now I have like my on button here. I have this preset object here, which I'll talk about in a second. I have a nice little readout of my frame rate next to my on button, so I can see if things are getting kind of like choppy. I have everything having to do with like the A channel of the movie. I'm just using channel 1, channel 2, channel A, channel B. They're all the same. I can smooth things. I can jump to random frames. I can do brightness, saturation, contrast. I can fade the movie A. And then I also have like my randomly fade back and forth button down here. So yeah, what's happening is, oh, come on. Down here, this little thing that looks like a TV stand or a presentation stand, it says patching mode. If I click on that, we get to see all of our code that was underneath it. And like this literally isn't any different from what I had in week 2, except that I have this preset object and I have all these comments in here right now. And what's going on is presentation mode. If I unlock the patch, it's kind of hard to see, or maybe not that hard to see. Any of these red outlines around something means that it's now part of presentation mode. And what I'm actually doing is I'm just saying, I as a coder have all this code, all these boxes and messages that I actually don't need to access while I'm performing or interacting. I just want to have everything that I can actually, this number box I would want to change, this toggle I want to turn on. And once I add that to something, it'll be visible in presentation mode, and I can move it, I can resize it, and it won't affect any of the the actual code. It'll all just snap back into place right here. And now I just basically have like an interface for how I interface with things. And like if I made a really simple version of this, just to demystify things, it would just be like jit grab, zoom the fuck in, open, toggle, Q, metro, jit vercosa, and brightness, saturation, contrast, float, float, float. And I'm not even gonna like clean this up the way I usually do, because I'm a man about town and I ain't got time for that kind of stuff. And now I'm just pasting it here in JIT window. I got a performance in 30 seconds. And if I select this toggle and I go to Object, Add to Presentation, now has a little red box around it. And I want this, and I want this, and I want this. I'm just holding Shift and clicking things. And sure, I want it to open too. And I'll go to Object, Add to Presentation. I can also do a hotkey, Shift Command P. And now everything there is visible. And if I go into presentation mode, it hides everything else. And I can just put this here, boom, boom, boom. And actually, I do want some comments. So while I'm in presentation mode, if I wanted to, I could just make a comment, C, or the comment box up here, and I'll say brightness.
That window there is from the patch, right? You didn't move it from the patch to the presentation.
Or did I move it from?
That window there.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that from the patch? Or do you have to like put the P window to the presentation?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. P windows, anything that's in the patch, you have to tell it that you want it in. And it can be a UI object, it can be the P window. The JIT window always, it's like its own thing that exists outside of the patch, so to speak. And you know what, I'll do this, I'll just do B, S, C. I get so tired of typing these.
What's the short?
The Command J, where it's like
Okay,
squishes, yeah. It'll just Command J. Oh god, that's Command hide. And now I can open, turn it on. This is the window from our other patch. Ignore it. And this is brightness. I guess I should turn floating on for this. I go back to presentation mode. Now we have our interface. And it's really that simple. And what's nice about it is like you can really just rearrange things in presentation mode, and you really don't have to worry about what happens to the code underlying on here. If you add things in presentation mode, it'll show up in random areas. Like I added those comment boxes. Sometimes I just stack them all together like this and just hide them. because they don't have anything to do with the code, but then when I go back into presentation mode, they snap back in and I can rewrite some more. I also have these colored panels. It's just like if I literally just type panel, and it says colored background area, and I can use the inspector to like change the color, interior color, and I don't want a gradient, I want that. One thing that's kind of weird, you'll notice that it covers everything. If I just right click and say send to back, then that's how you have it, so everything's sitting on top of it. And that's not necessary. Like sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, but like sometimes it's nice to organize by like having like little grids of like where certain information is, so I don't have to worry about it.
Do you use any sort of like color system and like organize them like, oh, this grid's gonna be yellow, this grid's gonna be green?
It depends when my performance is. I mean, sometimes I do, and then other times I just lose track of like what I thought was a color-coded system. Because if you like start to get into this and you build things out, I rarely ever start a patch from scratch. Like if I have a system that I like performing with, and I have another idea, I just keep adding to that system, or I rewrite that system, and like so I have like version 27.3, and like that's when the color coding system just goes out the window, where I'm like, I have no idea what I was trying to do 3 years ago. Are there any questions about presentation mode?
What is bring to back and front? Like,
Oh, it's just this little icon down here. It just says patching mode and presentation mode.
yeah, I mean like on the presentation mode, like right click and bring.
Oh, that's just for the panel.
Oh.
If you just right click on that, because if you want it to sit behind everything, I can just say bring to front, send it back. I think technically you could do that with these objects too. It's just like, why would you stack number boxes? You just confuse yourself. What's up, Warren?
Is there any keyboard shortcut for presentation mode?
For presentation mode,
Yeah.
I think view, option command D, obviously. Duh. Cool. The next thing is this weird little grid box right here. As you're patching and you're just like really fucking in the zone, and you're just like, this brightness, this saturation, this is just on point, and I want like minute 2 of my performance to just hit a button and like drop that like just look that I've created. These are all different presets. I kind of showed this really quickly before, but I'll just go into a little more. So if I click 2, I have like this number box was at 500, this number box was at 40, this one was at 20. If I go to 3, this number box, this effect was on, this was at 100. And I also usually like a convention I like to use is I set everything to 0 or its initial state with the first one. Just so, I guess I didn't do that right here this time. I guess I do want like an initial random frequency jump value. And once I have everything set up the way I like it, I just hold the shift button and click on that cell, and it'll override everything in there. So now it's 0 and 0 instead of 10 and 10. I have, the patch explains it, I have the preset help explains it. You can like, you can also send messages, so it just stores something at 1. And what it's really doing is, I'll use it here too. I'm going to close this one. Anything that's interactable in Max is automatic in your patch is exposed to the preset object once you make it. So this is not interactable, so like nothing is going to change inside of the code of like, if I had this at 50 and I changed it to 33, even though I had saved it another thing, it's not going to change any of the hard coding. But things like a toggle or a float box or a dial, things like that automatically get exposed here. A message is not exposed, but it is exposed in the sense that this number box, the value goes down through it once it triggers over to that. So just like if there's nothing in this at the moment, I hold shift and I click on 1, and then I change all these values. I turn this on, and this dial doesn't do anything, but I move it over here, and I go back to 1. You can see that everything's exposed there. You can also, there's this outlet right here, the third one. It says connect to objects to exclude from preset. So like, let's say I don't want my on-off button. I want to make sure it's always just something I have control over. I don't accidentally save a version of my patch where my Q Metro is not running. I can just hook this up to that object, and it'll exclude it from saving anything once I do that shift click onto it. And then I don't want this dial to update. So you see it didn't do anything with those. It's excluded them from saving anything.
That needs to be the third
What's that?
outlet. That needs to be
The third outlet. And you just have to hover over it, and it'll say it. Also in the help file, it'll show you which one specifically it is if you forget. And this really is at the heart of a lot of things I do. And there's an object. There's usually 2 objects. There's one called control in. CTLIN. I think there's also MIDI in. No, mid in. MIDI in. And this is kind of unlike other Max objects. I don't actually know why it's like this. But if I just double click on the control in while it's plugged in, it'll show me all the channels of what it's receiving MIDI information from. And you can see that my nano control 2 slider knob thing comes up. And MIDI gives you 3 things. It gives you the note, it gives you the velocity, and it gives you the channel. So here's this MIDI controller. If I move this fader up and down, it goes from 0 to 127. It is note 0, and it's on channel 1. If I move over, it is velocity Yeah.
Sorry, it's that I have no idea what MIDI is. It's like
Oh, sorry. That's totally MIDI. I think I'm glossing over all this because I'm just actually not that well versed in it. And I have a feeling there are people in this class that know what MIDI is more than I do. But MIDI is. I don't actually know what it's. Who knows what MIDI stands for? Yeah, but it is a
interface device.
musical interface device interface.
Sure.
It's something like that. Basically, it's a data protocol that's commonly used for software instruments. And if you use Ableton or whatnot, it's actually not audio. It's not like an audio file. It just if I had a MIDI file that played a song in Ableton, it's actually just system information that tells it what to recreate, not like an audio file that's stored or saved. I think it's all digital. Yeah, it's basically a series of commands, and it's a different softwares know how to execute those commands, and it's set up to be velocity would be how hard I hit a piano key, and note would be it's kind of meaningless in something like this because it's not if I had a piano roll, it would make sense what that is. But for our purposes, I can just use like, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. And that's where that route object can kind of come into play, is, but actually I'd want the select object. So that's actually a great point right here. What's the difference between select and route? Select is, I'm just stealing a note value right now. Select will compare what's coming in as a value against these arguments, and for each of these arguments, it creates a different outlet, and it'll send a bang if it matches that. So if I just hit 4, it'll add another one, and this isn't number, if it's 9, it's just going to add another one, but it's like saying it'll bang if an output matches 9. And now, that's 0. 1, every time 1 comes through, it just sends a bang out. 2 comes through, it sends a bang out. 3 comes through, it sends a bang out. So I can use the note to route on my MIDI controller where information goes. So I could say like, I could have that open a gate somewhere, or I could have it control. I would probably want to do that though by being like, if I had a switch, is that the right one? Yeah, switch 4. And I'm going to use trigger 1. Trigger is just like when it receives a bang, I'll just trigger a message. And it's the same as if I just made like a message called 3 and 4. And now my value from the velocity is coming in. Wait, no, sorry, I want a gate. I always mix those up. My value comes in here that I want to pass along. And my trigger, I'm saying if it's value 1, send it through the first gate. If it's value 2, send it through the second gate. If it's value 3, send it through the third gate. And then now I just like, and that's really all you need to know about MIDI controllers. Actually, one of the reasons I hate MIDI controllers is because MIDI will only give you a velocity between 0 and 127. And maybe people who know MIDI more than I do know how to get around this, but you like don't have any granularity with a value that's between. We've talked about how like if I want a value between 0 and 1,000, I can't scale this because if I can, but if I scale it, it'll just make these jumps between like we can actually even look at this. If I just scale 0 to 127 to 0 to 1,000.
Is 127 enough?
What's that?
When is it not enough?
Why is it not? It's not that it's not enough. It's just I'm never going to receive the values between 519 and 527.
You can scale down 10,000 to 127.
How do you
And then it will be okay.
scale down to the 10th of 1,000?
What?
What's
Yeah,
that?
go the opposite direction.
Divide by 1,000. He wants to scale MIDI to.
Yeah, but you can scale his filter down to 127.
No. I'm totally.
I don't think it will, because I think you're still, the input is still jumping really the same every time.
No, I'm asking because 127 is states between 0 and maximum for your filter.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure when is 127 not enough.
It's not that it's not enough, and like maybe you're addressing this. It's just that if I upscale it, I never see how it's 283 and 291. I'm never going to get a value. I'm never going to get 284, 285. It doesn't move through all those numbers because the scale of 0 to 127 to 0 to 1,000 means that it will always be 417 or 425, 417 or 425. And like when you're moving, like a lot of our things have a nice granularity when we move through it. And certain parameters, that's like a really large jump between values that we visually will see or audibly will hear. And I just find that frustrating about MIDI controllers. That being said, I use them all the time for certain things because it's so nice to just have something tangible like this. And literally all you have to do in your patch is just decide what is this going to control. Cool, that's 19. Now I need to route or use select to send anytime I send anything through 19, that velocity value has to go to this parameter. So, sorry, what was your question?
I have a question.
Okay.
So why when I press the key it doesn't work, but only I use the knob it can work? Like why press this it doesn't get any?
I mean, I can look at it with you. I don't know just looking at it. I've never used that.
Okay.
But we can take a look at it. It might be on a different. You're just not getting anything.
I think it also has like velocity node and channel, but I don't know why only this work. Yep.
Okay, we'll look at it. Did you have a question?
I was just going to say, doesn't it depend on the controller you have?
It's what?
Doesn't it depend on how good the controller is?
For the values?
Yeah.
No, that's the data protocol. It'll only send values between 0 and 127. And like, I mean, that's just one of the things I find frustrating about it.
Yeah,
So it has nothing to do. MIDI will only always give you a velocity between 0 and 127, a note that tells you which one it is, and then a channel, which, for all intents and purposes in Macs, in terms of using a MIDI controller, I think will almost always be 1. Although maybe there might be like if I change a setting here, it could then it'll start coming in over channel 2. But anyway, that's about as much time as I want to spend with MIDI. Not because I'm biased, but I will save that and send it to you guys though. But more just because like I find like that's kind of MIDI in a nutshell. Like you can buy these controllers off a rack somewhere and then you can hook them up to things and those are the values you get from it. What I find much more interesting is OSC, which is also a data protocol.
Derived from MIDI, right? It's kind of the next generation MIDI.
Mm-hmm. So OSC actually stands for Open Sound Control, and it was what people thought MIDI might become in the future, and it didn't. But then they realized it was really cool for other things. And in typical Macs confusion, to use OSC, I need to use something called UDP receive. Someone else can help me here. UDP is like part of a data protocol, like TCP and UDP network stuff.
Yeah, it's part of like the network like stack of how the internet works. Like, it's like a very low level protocol for how computers send packets of information to each other.
And OSC is part of that UDP packet, I believe. Like it uses the UDP infrastructure. So that's why we're using something called UDP receive rather than OSC receive. And it's literally 2 objects, UDP send and UDP receive. UDP, basically, if 2 computers are on the same Wi-Fi network, or just network, we can send values in between, like to each other. So I'm gonna try this. I think this is gonna work. I need to set a port that I'm receiving values from. The convention is usually to start at 8,000, and then 8,001, 8,002. The reason this convention exists is because some port numbers might actually already be in use by your computer. They're kind of hidden in the background that you don't know about. And 8,000 is kind of generally agreed on as like that would be a personal use kind of one. What I want you guys to do, if you're on the NYU network, is to make a UDP send object, and you're going to send it to my IP address, which I will tell you what it is, which happens to be 172.16.216.227. Yep, and so what you need to say with UDP send is, first you put what you're sending to in terms of an IP address, and what port is listening for you.
It should be 172, not 127 in the UDP send.
Which one? Oh, thank you. So this works as a send and receive locally on my computer. But if any of you are on the NYU network, try sending me something. Hey, there we go. Who sent that? Hey, Sam. Hey. And now you're probably all scrambling to have your messages heard. And you probably noticed it can be a list, it can be a string, it can be a float, it can be an integer. I know you're all anonymous right now, so like keep it civil. I don't think about why anyone would say something terrible, but we all like each other here. There's like been a history at ITP sometimes when people make like anonymous send projects, like it gets kind of ugly pretty quick. So, oh, yeah, there we go. And vice versa. So just so you understand, the simplicity of what we're doing here is as long as two computers are on the same network, and it's like amazing to me that it actually works over the NYU network because it's just like such a fucking behemoth. Like if you were to be performing, I always use my own router that doesn't even necessarily need to be connected to the internet unless I need internet, just so I have a closed network that I'm sending information between computers to. But the UDP receive only needs the port, its IP address is whatever the IP address that computer is. It knows its own IP address, and it's just saying, I am listening on port 8000. And it is the job of any other computers to use the UDP send object to say what IP address you're sending to and what port is listening on that IP address. And if you ever need to find out your IP address on like a Mac laptop, if you just literally type in network and network utility or something, it's usually right here, like just IP address. You don't need to worry about hardware address or subnet mask or anything. Now, here's the thing though, like you're all sending me this information and we can't even tell who's sending me what, or like it's just a complete clusterfuck. This is where the route object comes into place. So I want you to do me a favor. I want you to format your messages to say, we're going to try a new object, just to make things confusing, called prepend. And you're going to do backslash and your name. And this is like, you don't have to do it this way. You could also do mat, or your name, $1. Basically, it just adds, prepend is it prepends a message before any information it receives. So if I do int, there we go, yep. Acts the same way. So Oren's coming through, but I want to just, Oren's information needs to go somewhere specific. I want Oren to control, actually we're going to have a little fun with this. We're going to do a network performance here. I'm going to do JIT window, JIT grab, JIT vercosa, didn't I? Fuck, I already wrote all this. Can I just, yeah I did. Okay, so Oren, oh my god, someone's stolen my identity. This is, oh gee, what have I done? Pandora's box. So what route does is if I give it a message or a value or a string, it will compare any information coming in and it will use the first element of that message or that list as a key to say like, you should route this information here. So Oren, can you send me something?
Yeah.
So it's stripped away his name. We're still getting all of that. It's just that that first part of the message, keep going, or Sam, get the hell off it. I'm trying to teach here. we're using this part of the message, I guess technically this is a list, as our key that we're checking. And we're stripping that away and passing that out of this outlet. Okay, Sam, now's your moment to shine. I'll do Sam. And since you guys are... Keep sending, keep sending. Send Oren. Now, so now I can receive both of you because now everything with Sam's name in front of it is coming into this inlet, right? So now we're using route to literally create a route for different things to go to different places. And now I've got my little thing over here. I'm going to get you all involved. Don't worry. There's so many of you. I do know your names. Someone just asked me a question. What was that? I'm so excited. All right, Oren, send me a float.
Okay.
Sam, send me a float. Who's next? Who wants to send me a float?
Okay.
Who's sending me a float? Someone, quick. Who said that? What? Where am I? Is it capital? Or no, there it is. Oh, Luna, you want to get in on this? Cool. And I guess you can control jit dot op, no, not apps, plus okay. So, Caleb, do you have a capital C?
No.
Oh, okay. There's Tong. So everyone who's hooked up, start doing stuff.
Woo!
In theory, I don't know why I'm not getting Caleb. Here, I saw Tong. Let's try and get you in on the mix. We have our first communal class networked performance. We just exposed all the parameters of our patch to be something that I can hand off to any of you to control from your own personal computers. And it was really that simple. You just need to know an IP address and a port, and all be on the same network. What's even better, though, fucking A, is I can do this from my phone, you guys. So I have this thing called TouchOSC. This is really small. Or actually, everyone stop for a second. Gonna intercept the main line here. So this is TouchOSC. It's just an app I bought for $5, and I can. This is really hard to do backwards. I can like touch and pull these sliders and these buttons. There's like a grid of buttons and whatnot. And in it, I just set. Oh my, come on. There it is. I have the IP address I'm sending to, and somewhere in here, yes. Whoa, look at these color effects. Sorry, this is like the worst teaching method. There we go. I can set the host IP and the outgoing port. And if I'm on this network, which I should be, I'm just going to make it a new UDP receive 8,000. I kindly ask all of you to abstain from sending me messages for a second. and I just type in my IP address. Again, reiterating that this phone is on the NYU network, and that's the only reason this would work. And there we go. So you can build these in like a little editor on your laptop and upload it to your phone. And I have this grid of 9 buttons. And each time I click one, I can have it be a toggle. I can have it be a slider with a float. And I'm using, this is just this backslash thing and just a convention in OSC coding. You don't have to use it like that, but because I need to send this toggle, or sorry, this slider to one place and this slider to another place, I'm using the naming structure in the route object to make sure that they go specific places. And this I can't, you guys, when I was a student, we had some crazy parties, and I VJ'd at a lot of these crazy parties, and I VJ'd it from my phone while I was drinking on the dance floor. I didn't have to stand behind my computer and not party with everybody. I just hooked everything up to my phone, and I was drinking. I was like, yeah, let's do some Miley Cyrus videos on here, and let's do some chroma key feedback and everything. And I was a legend, you guys. Like, I just handed my phone to other people to control the path, like to do the. I was like, you be the VJ for a while, and they were like, oh my god. So this again. Secret sauce, like we know this. So now when you guys VJ and you're controlling from your phone, like you give each other like, yeah, we know what's up. The other fun thing too, I debug a lot. You can get a lot of parameters from your phone. I think you can get just from this one specifically. Is this? You can get the accelerometer data of your phone. So you can see that first number. I'm just tilting it up. I tilt it side to side, -1 to 1.
Did you unpack that?
What's that?
You use unpack to get that into
Exactly, yeah. So I would do route XYZ. And I could do unpack. Because it's 3 floats, I would do FFF. Just saying the data coming in as a float. Wait, that didn't work. What did I do? What's going on? Who? You could also do 0 point, 0 point. And let's see, I could just and I could hook that up to my XYZ. This isn't the best example because, oh, I know what I can do. I'll just add 1 to everything, because 0, I just don't get anything. So 1. So, yeah, that's called Touch. And I just like this one. It's called Touch OSC. If you literally look at the App Store, there's like a bunch of them. The other thing is, I can also use this. I use this all the time to send max data to Unreal Engine. and Unreal Engine data to Max data. Like it's really just a bridge of sending data between computers and softwares. You don't have to send it over a network. You can send it locally in your computer because OSC is just a data protocol. So Unity has an OSC plugin, Unreal Engine has an OSC plugin, processing has an OSC plugin. And it's just a matter of like, what data do you want to send from one software or one computer to another one? I did a lot of stuff where, like, I'll show you like an example. Stupid hackathon. Just skip past that. Oh god, something horrible happened. I literally made this in a day with Unreal Engine and Max, and I love this music. I put my phone in this cube that I found on the junk shelf, and then I mapped the XYZ data of that to Max and sent it to Unreal, and now I didn't have to build an app. I didn't have to like, the OSC is like the best thing in the world. It like, you're gonna crush it at ITP if you learn OSC because like just suddenly everything communicates with everything and there's like all these things that did all the work for you. And yeah, I can't stop raving about it. I know, I have a better example of it in the web page. I know this got kind of like chaotic and crazy, but yeah. Not really. I mean, like OSC is one of those things that's just kind of hidden in the background. Like if I wanted, what's that? Yeah, it's like I can't think of. I mean, like if you did something with your phone and the gyroscope or the controller is that, I guess that would be an OSC performance. It's just kind of a way to connect everything. So if you had a part of your components or a controller or something, or you wanted, if you wanted to use Unity and like have all these cubes falling, and when the cubes hit the ground and they had different colors and you wanted to report, like you could send that to Max to play like a tone or a sound or something. So it's just kind of like a universal patch cable hooking data up to each other. Yeah.
You can also call that a Unity image.
What's that?
Like you also can call Unity image to Max and then play with that image.
No, not the Unity image. You can have report things happening. So like if you have like a cube in Unity, you can have a collision detection on it. And when that cube hits the ground, you could use OSC to send the fact that a cube hit the ground to Max and then have Max play a song based on receiving that value. So like it's just a way of reporting occurrences or reporting data between multiple things. So.
Yeah, like I think the one thing, and maybe to add on to that, is that you can use like, for example, you don't send audio over OSC, you just send like audio analysis. Like it's more like you can't send like very rich, it's not like very rich information. It's just like the analysis or like the results of the.
Mm-hmm. And like it goes back to the thing we were looking at with the image sonification. Like when I started playing the audio, even though I started with like my camera and then grayscale and then pure black and white binary, then I downsampled, then I grabbed the average, it all just like burrowed down to one number that I could have sent that one number anywhere. I'm not actually sending the video like frame information over a network. It's just a matter of like you learning how to be like, this is the information I need to send in order for another thing to happen and to report like a relationship between those two things. It is possible to send video data over a network though, and we might get to that too.
I was trying to do that.
Yeah. If any of you, like, some of you have already tapped into it, the OSC version of video frames and video data is called Siphon. It's the exact same idea as this. Lots of languages have it, lots of software has it, but it's a way of, like, if I wanted to bring in the image in Unity to Max to mix it in real time or to do effect compositing on it, I would use a plugin called Siphon, which allows you to pass video information over your GPU between different softwares, and it keeps it really efficient.
Is it possible? I've checked out the Siphon implementation for Max, and it's a little idiosyncratic. Is there a way to use it with a regular JIT, or do you have to do GL?
It's all because the only reason it works is because it keeps everything on your GPU,
Right.
which allows it to be really, really like low intensity on like the processing side of things. So yeah, it only works in the context of like your graphics card is passing that information around. What's that? It's just passing textures. Like an individual texture, and then the next frame is an update of that texture.
Like
So-
GPU memory. Like your GPU has memory for storing image data, and so Siphon works because on the Mac, that memory is unprotected, and any program can read it. So it's actually a huge hack that Siphon works all. So Siphon can only read memory that's controlled by your GPU.
But let's say you need to export something
Well- Yeah, each of these things has a plugin that works with the Siphon framework. Siphon's like OSC, where you don't download OSC and you don't necessarily download Siphon. You download Siphon for Unity, Siphon for Max, Siphon for Python, and it just creates inlets and outlets at each side, and it's using OSC to send it along or using Siphon to send it along. So you would have to set up in Unity, like, I'm sending this over a Siphon server, and in Max, we'd be listening to a Siphon client. That's me like musically coding and emphasizing points by hitting the period key. Are there any last questions? I can show you Arduino really quick. The class is over, and I don't mind staying and showing you because it might be important to some of you, but I have no expectation if that's not interesting to you for you to stick around. How about that? What's that? I will make the video of it. The one problem with it is like, I don't know, then you won't get to see this thing I built, and I spent a lot of time on it, you guys. No, I'll have a video up. I'm just gonna like do this for 10 minutes, and I swear to God, you can leave if you want. I'm not gonna like hold anyone hostage. So, that sound like a cool agreement between all of us? Okay. Are there any big picture things about OSC that people are just like, could you just explain that really simple part or really complex part again? Is what? Yeah, I'll have a tutorial online. Oh, for like the one I make or other ones? Well, it's tricky. It's a good question. It's just that OSC isn't a thing. Like, so it's entirely there's if you needed a tutorial for OSC with Unity, there's a ton of those. There's a ton of them for Max. There's a ton of so it just depends which one you're trying to get it to work with. Okay, then yeah, just look at my tutorial. Look at the screen recording, but there's also stuff in the forums. It's really common to use OSC with Max. So. So with Arduino, like, I'm not a hardware person. I did manage to build this somehow, and it probably took me 10 times as long as it took me to build the code for like what I wanted it to end up controlling. There's basically an Arduino Mega in here, and there's a bunch of push buttons right here, and these push buttons just report whether they're on or off. And I'm literally like, think my code is, I guess I can show you really quick. I'm just gonna stop it. Okay, cool. So in many ways, Arduino is almost exactly like the JIT movie object, where we're just going to have a queue metro. I don't know why I did 30 instead of 33. I think I was just rushing through things. And we have this serial object. And the serial object expects 2 arguments. It's what port your Arduino is on. It's connected over USB. And it's usually represented as A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And also the baud rate, which 99% of the time I find to be 9,600. I think that's what, and like that's also set in my Arduino code as the baud rate. To figure out which serial port your Arduino thing's on, you can send it print, and it'll print. It's not Bluetooth, but it is USB modem 1421.
You have to open serial port.
No, yes and no. We're just printing what, we're not printing the serial information. We're printing what, this is our USB ports. What port is my Arduino plugged into?
Yes, what I'm saying is you have to open that serial port.
Oh, the P5.
P5.
The P5 is
This thing actually. Isn't it this?
yeah, that's the guy.
What the hell is that?
That's for
Don't sneak up on me like that. I had this get on this computer.
Wait, that's for
I vaguely, we had a processing version of this or something. Maybe? We don't have to do anything like that. That's a great one. I was just like, oh, God, I'm getting old. So this port B, you can barely see it. I can't zoom in on there. It says USB modem 1421. That is the correct one. Sometimes I just have to try different ones and check. And once I have that, I can just click open. And this opens the serial port. This is the equivalent of when Tom Igoe was like, the one thing to remember about serial is you can only have it open on one port at a time. So if you have your what was it called? Like hot editor or something, or crazy key. There was one that everyone used when I was a student to view incoming serial data. There was something like hot or crazy in the first. Whatever, I'm just confusing you guys at this point. If you're monitoring your serial, if you were using Arduino to monitor your serial device and seeing the inputs coming in, you wouldn't be able to open or close it in Max, and vice versa. If it's open in Max, you can't view it in other places and receive that data somewhere else. And now I'm going to turn it on, and you can see after this string of code that I will explain, I have all these crazy undulating button values followed by this. And this is where I was talking about the importance of the route object. If I say route button _1, and I can figure out which one on here is 1, the very last one. When I push it in, I get 1, and when I let go, I get 0. And if I added button 2, there it is. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And this is where the formatting of how I had my messages set up on the serial print line matters now, because I want to be able to separate the values so that I can look at the name that I have in the initial part of the list, so I can use the route to tell it where to go, and then get the value of my actual sensor. If I had a potentiometer, I'd probably /potentiometer 1, and then print the value there, and we'd be seeing me going through 0 to 1024. So what the hell is all this stuff doing? We are converting it because what we're actually getting, I'm going to disconnect this print here. We're not getting these ASCII values. We're getting all this serial data. And it's coming out just like this mess, this stream of numbers. And you'll remember, this is the same stuff we see when we use the key object. When I want the escape key, and I hit escape, it returns 27. So the escape key is represented by serial, I believe, as the value 27. The space bar is represented as 32. And it's taking our serial print line, that underscore, like backslash button, all that, and it's representing each character as that serial integer. And they're just coming in as this giant stream of a thing. So we need to like use max to tame that stream and return it to its ASCII provenance. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this select object. And remember select, it's like listening for a value, and when it receives that value, it'll return a bang. And I'm listening for a 10. The reason I'm listening for a 10 is in serial, a 10 represents a new character line. So what I know is every time a 10 comes through here, it means that it's gotten to the end of the serial print and gone down to the next one. So I'm basically almost using that as like a period at the end of my sentence. I know that that sentence is over because a 10 has come through here. The thing I haven't explained about select is anything that doesn't match always comes out of its last outlet. This is coming in so fast that you won't be able to tell the difference. But essentially, every time a 10 comes in, I get a bang. And until that next 10 comes in, all the other values keep getting passed along, passed along, passed along, passed along, then 10, bang. Passed along, passed along, passed along, 10, bang. Are you guys with me on that so far? And that's why I'm using this ZL group object. ZL group will take all these incoming values and it'll just store them and store them and store them in sequential order until it receives a bang. And when it receives a bang, it'll return all of those values as one packaged list. So you see why that 10 is so important? That 10 is what's actually separating all those different messages and packing it all together.
So the select 10 to ZL group linked up like that is sort of equivalent to like our read line thing in Arduino or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then this is all still an integer, and there's another inscrutably named max object, ITOA, stands for integer to ASCII, and it knows how to convert, like our key object, where it's representing 109 as an escape key, or 27 as the escape key. It'll do the opposite, and it'll actually convert all that for us. And then the very last thing we're doing is, because integer to ASCII doesn't, because it's ASCII, even though we might receive a float or a string, it just assumes everything, or sorry, a float or an integer, it assumes everything's a string because it doesn't know how to separate integers, floats, strings. So from symbol, if you remember, a lot of times instead of strings, they call them symbols in Max, so this could also be called from string. It basically just removes this quotation mark around it so that it actually becomes a list, and it represents it as this. So now we have our string here, and we have our value represented as an integer after that right here. And that's just where the route comes into play here, and we can separate all those values coming in. And like I said, this literally can just be repeated as ad nauseum for every Arduino patch you ever use in Max. All that you have to make sure you do with your Arduino code is that you just set up the print line, serial print line that you would have gotten to get your values anyway in other like languages. It just has a name in front of it, and then it has the value that you're trying to report. And then with Max, like one thing I get this 0 or 1. One thing you have to be careful of that is a little different is even though I'm getting a 0 or 1, I'm getting a hell of a lot of 0s or 1s. So if I had like a toggle, this works, but it's really inefficient because it's constantly saying turn the toggle off, 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 turn it on, because everything's still hooked up to this Q metro that's reporting its data. And there's a really simple object called change. And change just only reports a value if it's different from the previous value. There you go. So now it's just stripping away all those repeats of 0. And then when it goes to 1, it gives me that, and it strips away the repeats of 1, and it gives me that. And that's just a way of like, if you have places in your patch that's not related to video frames or other things that need to be updated 30 times a second with your QMetro object, like if you have like a toggle that's just receiving 0 like 30 times a second, it's not going to change how toggle behaves, but you are asking your computer to process the fact that toggle has been set to 0 30 times a second, and that can start to accumulate and build up and cause your patches to run slow. So that's just something sometimes you need to debug and keep in mind is, like, is this data that's coming through active? And if it is, does it need to be active? Can I hook up something like a change to it so that I can strip away these repeated values that are coming through? Cool. Thanks for sticking with me on that, guys. Any questions? Great. I don't have to teach next week or the week after that because you guys are just going to perform. I can't wait. No.
Quick question, how to send the message through the OIC to you?
To what?
Like,
To,
for you to receive, like sending, like they send the message to you.
how do you send an OSC message to me?
Yeah.
It was just like I had said, the UDP receive.
Yeah, but like.
To do.
So like, this is like your.
Mm-hmm.
But like, how can I send?
I have to have an object called UDP receive 8000 listening.
Okay, but where can I send that to you?
Where?
No, yeah, I mean here, like I send to you.
Oh, just send. You have it hooked up. That whatever number you do right there would be sent to me.
So it's here.
Yeah.
So I
Well, anything you feed into that, as long as it's a string, a list, a float, or an integer, will come out of that
To here.
on my computer.
Okay, but I send it from here.
Yeah.
But like how but they send the words like non-members.
Oh, yeah, but I mean that also that's a list. That just it would. I mean. Sure. If you sent that, it would just send a message called C.
Okay,
But
I think
you-
I tried.
You could do it's like prepend. So I don't know how to. Let's see.
I think we found some.
Oh yeah, that's right. And that's all you do. And here, I'll set it up right so you can see. I just go UDP receive 8000 and send me something.
Right here.
Yep. Oh, it's 172.